Good evening, dear friends. I hope you are all well. I thought that I shared some reflections with you about the Baha'i perspectives on health and healing. And the primary reason that I decided to do this is because we live in a very unhealthy world. Right now, the world is not well. People are not well, and communities are not well, families are not well. The whole world is in difficult situation. The whole earth is suffering. So we live at a time when health doesn't come easily. And even conditions that usually people don't think of being related to health, such as having a lot of food to eat, has changed into being the cause of illness now. One of the greatest really challenges of our time is with respect to what people eat and how much people eat. We have half of the world, a large population in the world, that are undernourished, and they get sick and die much easier and much faster because they don't have enough food to eat. And we have, again, millions of people around the world that are unhealthy because the opposite of the situation. This is just a simple example of how unhealthy our life has become. When I started my medical studies, went to medical school, I was much younger than I am now. Yes, I was 16 when I went to medical school, so it was young. But at that time, medical school in Iran was a combination of pre-med and med. You would go pre-med and med together to medical school. And therefore you go to school for 6 years of training and at least 1 year of internship. And then, of course, you have 3 or 4 years and 5 years of specialization, so it takes a long time. But I remember when I went to the school, which was in Shiraz, the first day, we had a professor who was a remarkable man and very knowledgeable, but wise person. And he said, we have to remember that medicine and medical field, health field, is a combination of two things. One is the science of medicine, and the other one is the art of healing. And he said, the problem that we have had over the life of humanity is that either one or the other of these two have dominated the field. He said, throughout history of humanity, science of medicine was very elementary. And therefore, what was really happening between patients and their caregivers, the doctors, was the healing process that would come in. They didn't know why some doctors, their patients got better and others didn't. They didn't know that because we didn't know the dynamics of health, physical health and psychological health. But some physicians were healers and some were not. And majority of them didn't know much about the science of medicine. And then he said, we are now at a time when science of medicine is coming to the forefront. And the danger is that people will forget to become healers also. And that was in 1952 or so. So that was a long time ago. And sure enough, we live at a time now in human history that the physicians have become the technicians of human body and know very little about the art of healing and establishing relationships and creating conditions of healing and so forth. So we have gone from one extreme to the other extreme. And we have developed a system of medicine that is disease-oriented. It is oriented toward waiting for people to get sick and then having these expensive and usually not very effective ways of treating this sickness, rather than learning how to be the promoters of health and healing. So the science of medicine and the art of healing has been going through revolutions and change. And whenever the art of healing and science of medicine are not together, then you have healers who are not scientifically knowledgeable, and you have scientists who are not capable of establishing healing relationships. And you have an imbalance. And we definitely see it in our situation around the world right now, and especially in countries like United States and Europe and Canada and so forth. So these are related, of course, to the two areas of human knowledge, because human knowledge, of course, is on the one hand a scientific knowledge, a knowledge based on research, observation, understanding of the dynamics of the material world, the way the body works, the way all of the elements of this physical world that we live in and how they interact and their relationship with each other and so forth. And we also have the knowledge of spiritual dimension of human life, and that is the issue, the dimension related to the way that we feel, the way we think, with the way we approach life, our orientation to life. And gradually we are learning that our body and our mind, our soul and our body, they interact. And they are constantly in state of interaction with each other. And the health of one affects the health of the other, and the illness of one affects the illness of other. And because we live in a world right now that is materially oriented, is a materialistic world, and denies and rejects the spiritual dimension of human life. Consequently, medicine and medical health has gone that way, and it needs to be brought back to create a balance. In other words, we have to have the scientific and the spiritual balanced in processes of health and healing. Now, and gradually, it's very interesting that this is happening now after a century or century and a half of total emphasis on physical dimensions of health, now and illness. Now we are seeing research coming in, and respectable universities begin to look into issues of relationship between soul and body, between mind and body, and how they interact, the impact of prayer, the impact of meditation, all of those things gradually coming back. But it's going to take a while until we really understand how these things work. It is in this respect, therefore, that Baha'is may have some, or will definitely have some, unique insights to offer, because the Baha'i faith, being the reservoir of the latest spiritual input into humanity through the manifestation of God, Baha'u'llah, it has new insights about the workings of the human soul, human mind, human psyche, and the relationship of this to the life of the physical life of the individual and of the society. And therefore, it would be a good idea to look into it and to see what Baha'u'llah says about health and healing and causes of disease, and what he suggests should be the solution, what is the diagnosis of the world of humanity. This is particularly relevant because Baha'u'llah says that the manifestations of God, like Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Buddha, Baha'u'llah himself, they are at once divine physicians and divine educators. They are at once, they are divine physicians, and they diagnose the ills of humanity and prescribe the necessary treatment for the conditions of humanity. And they are divine educators, which means they also teach us how to live healthy lives. So these two stations of a manifestation, divine physician and divine educator, has a direct relevance to what we are talking tonight. Baha'u'llah says that not only the manifestations of God are divine physicians, he also described them in other names. He says the all-knowing physicians, true physicians, great and supreme physicians, unerring physicians, divine and infallible physician. So he wants to emphasize that the manifestation of God is the physician for the ills of humanity. He says the all-knowing physician had his finger on the pulse of mankind. He perceived the disease and prescribed it in his unerring wisdom, the remedy. Okay. So if that's the case, we better look into it and to see what is our disease and what is the solution for it, the treatment for it. He also says the prophets of God should be regarded as physicians whose task is to foster the well-being of the world and its peoples. So we are talking about individuals as well as societies of people and so forth. Abdul Baha says, all the holy prophets were as doctors to the soul. They gave prescriptions for the healing of mankind. Thus, any remedy that causes disease does not come from the great and supreme physician. So, the point is very clear. Okay. The claim of the manifestation is that the manifestation is the divine physician. Now, when we read the writings of Baha'u'llah about what is the fundamental disease of humanity, over and over, he identifies one phenomenon as the disease of mankind, as the cause of the disease for all conditions that we have. And that he says that this disease is disease of disunity. Inner disunity, interpersonal disunity, intergroup disunity, and international global disunity. And also disunity between the individual, between people, and the environment in which we live. All of these, all the remedy, all the conditions of humanity are ultimately because of the disease of disunity. Now that sounds simple or sounds not relevant. How about cancer, for example? Is cancer a disease of disunity? Just think of cancer, okay? It's a very interesting phenomenon. Human body is composed of a large number of cells that they are in different parts of the body and create different organs of the body. So you have the cells for the heart, the cells for the lung, cells for the brain, and so forth. Okay? And these cells collaborate and work together, united among themselves, so that the heart functions well and the lung functions well and the brain functions well. And also these cells are united with and harmonious with the other cells. So the cells of the heart and cells of the brain and lungs and so forth do not interfere with each other. They collaborate with each other. So human body is a manifestation of a supreme operation of law of unity. It's just unity. Unity always takes place in the context of diversity. Okay, and human body is the supreme example of operation of the law of unity in the context of diversity. And any time that the unity of the human body, or one part of human body, one cell of human body, is interfered with, you have disease. Okay? So, what is a cancer? For example, a cancer of lung means that one of the cells in the lung says, I am not going to follow the rules of collaboration that we have right now. I am going to multiply. I'm going to get bigger than others. I'm big, and I'm going to multiply. So what happens? After a while, you have a tumor in your lung, okay? Which is a changed cell of lung, but it has changed its character. No longer is a unifying cell, is a disunifying individualistic cell. And if you don't pay attention to it and don't cut it and throw it out and kill it with drugs and whatever that we do nowadays, what it does, it travels. It says, I don't care that I belong to the lung. I'm going to go and sit in the brain. I'm going to the bones. I'm going wherever I want to go. Right? Which is exactly what happens. And you have then metastasis. And in the process, this individualistic and cooperative disuniting cell kills itself and the host. And the whole organism dies. You see how it functions. You see. And when you look at all diseases, you will see that this is indeed the case. Let me read a couple of examples here for you. First, from writings of Baha'u'llah about the disease of disunity. Baha'u'llah says, that which the Lord had ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world, the healing of all the world, and we are in it, is the union of all its people in one universal cause. He further says that this union can in no wise be achieved except through the power of a skilled and all-powerful and inspired physician. In other words, the process of creating a state of health is the process of learning how to create unity. Physical unity, psychological unity, social unity. We have to learn how to create unity. Okay. This is important because when you want to see what is the definition of health, for example, in books, different medical books and so forth, when they talk about definition of health, they say health is a state of wholeness, equilibrium, balance, and harmony. Okay? And they're talking about physical health. Health is a state of wholeness, equilibrium, balance, and harmony. These are different descriptions of the phenomenon of unity, okay? In brief, organic unity. Health is a state of organic unity. Healing is the process of creating unity in all aspects of life. So it is in this context that we want to talk about physical illness and psychological illness and social illness, and to see how we can become instruments in our own health. As you know, you cannot make a difference between a separation between physical health and psychological health. They affect each other. In other words, the way your body is affects your mood, your feelings, your way of thinking, your way of feeling. And this is called somatopsychic. Soma means body, and psychic is psyche, soul. Somatopsychic means that the way your body is going to affect your soul, your emotions, your feelings, your way of thinking. And psychosomatic means the way that your emotions and thoughts are going to affect your physical health and your body. So all conditions, physical illnesses that we have, and all psychological illnesses that we have are at once psychosomatic and somatopsychic. Sometimes the predominant disease is in the body, but it expresses itself in psychologically. Sometimes the predominant disorder is in our emotions and thoughts, but they impact the body. And they are always together. You cannot separate them from each other. And throughout history, we have now many, many examples of people having been misdiagnosed. You know, somebody would come and say, well, this person is always complaining and is always sad and has difficult, and this is a difficult person and so forth. And then later they discovered that actually this person has a brain tumor that is putting pressure in certain part of the body, or an endocrine condition, or hormonal changes, and so forth that has caused that condition. We see those things constantly in the literature that are related to misdiagnosis of people and so forth. This happens all the time. I'll give you an example of my personal experience that was very dramatic. You know, in Iran, the Baha'i faith has been subject to persecution from the very beginning. And one of the times that these persecutions were very strong were early 1950s, when in Iran a systematic plan was developed to, if at all possible, to eradicate the Baha'i faith in Iran. Okay. They took over all Baha'i institutions. They outlawed all Baha'i activities. They kicked children and adolescents and young people out of schools. They did an enormous systematic attack on the Baha'i faith. It wasn't as bad as it is now for the last 30 years. That one was short-lived, was about 2-3 years. And it wasn't, and not many Baha'is were killed. There were, in the city that I was living, close to where we were living, 7 Baha'is were killed, and a number of individual Baha'is here and there around were killed. So one of the places that a Baha'i had been killed was a little place called Afus. Afus was a village on the top of a mountain. And it was quite far from the city I was living at that time, which was Isfahan. It was about 250 kilometers from Isfahan. and he would go up the mountain, and you reach to the top of the mountain, and Afus was there. Okay? And at that time, I was in third year of medical school. And I had a magnificent friend who had graduated from medical school at that time. And he had just started his practice in medicine. And his name was Dr. Heshmatullah Rohani. He was a very, very remarkable person. He was one of those people who was at the same time a healer and a scientist. He was a unique person. And I saw many remarkable acts related to both his scientific knowledge and his healing capacities. But on this time, both of us were members of the youth committee, Baha'i committee of Isfahan. And being young and being ambitious and being, how young people are, we decided that we wanted to go and visit the Baha'is of Afus. Now, the Baha'is of Afus had been out of contact with the rest of the communities in Isfahan for about 4 years. Nobody had heard anything from them. We had known that there were about 150, 200 Baha'is living in the village. We knew that the most prominent person in the village, in the Baha'i community, who was a young individual who was secretary of the Spiritual Assembly of Baha'is of Afus, had been killed during the crisis that had subsided 2 years earlier. And but we knew that the problems were continuing there, and people were in desperate situation. And Heshmat said, let's organize a group that we would go and visit altogether, I don't recall, 13 or 14 communities, villages, from after Isfahan, leaving Isfahan, going up the mountain. There were about 14 or 15 Baha'i communities. So let's go and visit each of them and end it in Afus. And we said, okay, that's a marvelous idea. And what we did, it was summertime, but Afus was on top of mountain, so maybe cold, maybe. So we also, the only way that we could go was bicycles, because we didn't have money to have cars, and besides, the roads were not all that sure, so bicycles were the ones that you go. So we were five of us. And the five was Heshmat, who was the physician. So he said, okay, we have to have a lot of medicine with us, all kind of medicine, so that when we go to these villages, they don't have doctors, they don't have things, so we can help them and so forth. So he was the physician, and one other person who was a technician and knew how to take the blood and this and that. The doctors don't know, he knew. He was the technician. So he was the assistant for Heshmat. And then I was given the responsibility that whichever community we would go, we would meet with the Baha'is, and we'd meet with the assembly and with the community and inform them of Baha'i activities and what has been happening. and also take with us a number of books and papers and pen and all of those things for classes for the children and so forth. So it was a community information, so forth. And the fourth one and fifth one were the younger ones, so they were in charge of repairing the bicycles and preparing the food and this kind of thing, because they were young, okay? So we were hierarchy, and authoritarian, and it was good. It worked. So we started, and it's a long story. I wouldn't go the remarkable things that happen in every village until we reached the village just before Afus. And Baha'is there told us, okay, it is dangerous to go to Afus. We advise you not to go. But if you decide to go, you have to go to enter after the sunset when it is dark and leave Afus before the sunrise while it still is dark. That's the only way you should go. We said, okay. So it was probably about 20th of July or something like that time of the year. We bicycled and arrived, and also we said, okay, how we find Baha'is? They said, well, it's easy. There is only one main road that you enter. And as you enter and you go around, you will see a house on your left that the door of it is half burned. This is the home of the former secretary of the assembly who was killed. And now his wife and her parents, who the father who happened to be the chairman of the assembly, they live there. So you go to that door, and that's it. That's your address. We said, okay. So we arrived, and even though it was 20th of July, I don't think they had calendar. There was snow on both sides of the road. It was truly cold, and we had only one shirt on, you see. It was truly cold. It was high. It was very high. And so we came in, and sure enough, here was the door half burned. We knocked at the door, and somebody, obviously surprised, said, who is it? And we said the magic word in the Baha'i community. We said, Allah Apa. Allah Apa is what Baha'is do to each other, greet each other, meaning God is the most great. But we use it that way, and this is the way that Baha'is greet with each other. We do greeting. So we said, Allah Apa, the door opened. And we went in, and we told them who we were and what we had. And we told them that we have a doctor with us and medicine. He said, well, we haven't had a doctor for 4 years. And a lot of people are sick and so forth. And he started delighted, and he sent people and informed all Baha'is. And they came. And in about an hour, we had 150, 60 people in the house. They all came, and they were all sick, okay? And they all had to be seen, okay? And Heshmat started seeing patients and dispensing medicine with his with the person that was the assistant. In the other room, now all the Baha'is are sitting here, is the waiting room. Okay, we sat in the waiting room and we start talking, telling them about what has happened since the crisis and since the attacks and in the Baha'i world and around the world and so forth. And Baha'is, and there were a lot of tears and a lot of laughter and a lot of excitement and questions and gradually, one by one, patients would go in and come out. And at about 5 o'clock in the morning, only half of the patients had been seen.
Excuse me, what year was that?
That was 1953 or 4. Yeah. So, they asked us to stay. We said, are you sure? They said, well, people already know that something is happening here. So everybody is curious and you should stay. By 7 o'clock, the whole village had learned that there was a doctor in town. So everybody came, Muslims, and came to the house of these Baha'is, and everybody sitting around. And the Iranian homes, they have a courtyard, and people sitting around the courtyard, and there's a little pool in the middle. Everybody was there. Okay? And this was the first time that the Muslims and the Baha'is had come together since the killing. But everybody needed to see the doctor. Okay? So after a while, Heshmat turned to me and said, okay, you're a third-year medical student. It doesn't matter. You better start seeing patients, okay? Okay? And do your best, okay? We are here. We want to finish by the afternoon and we go, okay? So I started, okay, poor people, I don't know what did to them. But actually we went back and they were all alive. So that much we know, okay? So anyway, we started seeing patients and gradually people went and so forth. And then suddenly the chairman of the assembly, the host, came to us and said, he is coming. I said, who is coming? He said, the guy who killed the secretary. He's coming. So, okay. And here was this old man clearly suffering from pain and in agony with a cane. He came and sat with Heshmat, and I was there. And he said, I know you know who I am. And I have come here. I don't expect you to save me or help me or anything like that. It is 4 years since the incident. And I have been ill ever since then. I have this unbelievable pain here. I have gone for treatment to Isfahan and to Tehran and to the best clinics. We have done all the tests. We have done everything. Nothing has worked. I am ready to die. And I have come to ask you to help me to die. And Heshmat said, well, sorry, I cannot do it. We have come here to help people not to die. And you have to go to some other doctor, not to me. He said, but there is no solution. Well, Heshmat said, well, let me treat you, let me examine you. And so he did some examinations. And then he said, I have to consult with my colleague, which was me. to see what we can do. I said, all right. So he come, we go to the other room, and he looks at me and said, I don't have a clue what is wrong with you. I don't have a clue. So, you better pray, and I am going to give him, and he said, we are practically out of all medicine, okay? So, I have some, I think it was vitamin C injection. Okay. So I'm going to give him a really big shots of vitamin C. And we pray and let's see what happens. All right. I said to Heshmat, maybe you fulfill his desire. His hope that he dies. And he said, well, this is not the time for joke. I said, all right. So here we are. This man is there. So Heshmat comes back and says, yeah, we consulted. And we decided that we are going to give you one shot now and one shot tomorrow. And it's going to be very painful and very difficult. But you have to go through that. He said, oh, that's all right. And so forth. So Heshmat gave him the injection, and he went through the process. He picked up the largest needle. He made sure that everything was very dramatic, and he did it. He gave him the shot, and the man went home. And we have been up for 24 hours. So we ate something and went to sleep and decided to stay. It was too late because the whole village knew that we were there and we were Baha'is, and that was it. And the following morning, we got up and the gentleman came back for his second shot with big smile on his face. He said, this is the first time I have slept all night in 4 years. He said, the first time I have slept. And we gave him the other shot, and he was cured. It's an example of a psychosomatic illness. He was filled with shame and anger and sorrow and all the negative feelings. He had to be forgiven. He was ashamed. Yeah. He had to be forgiven. He had to be accepted again. He had to be, to be put at peace. And the only way possible was to encounter a physician like Heshmat, who was remarkable. His loving attitude and his professional approach together would create a person that you would have full confidence that whatever he does is going to result in positively. You see, and that's an example of how the brain, the mind, the psyche, the soul, and the body interact with each other. It's always, and there are examples of it all over, but this was the one that I encountered myself. So what happened in this individual, it was that his deeds, what he had done, and his principles were at odds with each other. He was suffering with a profound degree of inner disunity. And he had to be brought back to a condition of unity. And this was the vehicle through this happened, you see. By the way, we had a number of travels like that with Heshmat. And anyway, we came back, and it was a rather rough trip, of course, by bicycle, 250 kilometers up the mountain and then coming 250 kilometers down. At that time, I was in medical school, as I said, and I was living alone in a small room that I have rented from a Baha'i family. And I was hungry, so I went and bought 18 eggs. And that's all money I had, okay? 18 eggs. And I bought a number of these flatbreads. Came home, made an omelette of 18 eggs. Ate them all, okay, with the bread, went to bed. And the next time that I woke up is when Heshmat and another friend broke the door and entered in the room. I have been sleeping for 18 hours. And they thought, and they had banged the door and everything and no response. And they thought that there was something wrong. So they came in. So Heshmat, just one more word about him. He was arrested along with the first group of the members of National Spiritual Assembly of Baha'is of Iran at the beginning of the revolution in Iran, and he was killed. We never heard of him again. And this was a precious soul like that was sacrificed. So anyway, going back to the issue of what we are talking about, is that the fundamental challenge of health before us is the challenge of learning how to create unity within ourselves, between our emotions, thoughts, actions. You see, the inner unity requires unity between our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions, and our principles, moral principles. And when we have that kind of thing, then we have inner unity. Majority of time, we think one thing, we feel another thing, we do a third thing. We go against our principles. We feel guilty. We feel full of anxiety. And we lose our state of emotional health, you see, which then results in bringing down our defense mechanisms, and then it creates physical illness and so forth. So we have to learn how to develop inner unity. And one of the fundamental aspects of inner unity also is the issue of moderation. Moderation is essential aspect of unity, because extremes always create difficulty and challenges. It is the moderation that allows the individual to be in a state of unity in everyday life, or individuals in their relationship with each other. To learning the ways of moderation and avoiding the extremes is very difficult in the world that we live right now, because we live in the world of extremes. You see. The other aspect of moderation is that when we live moderate lives, we allow our bodies not to be unduly stressed or distressed. You see, living extreme, that's obvious. Baha'u'llah says the sign of maturity is moderation. The sign of maturity is moderation.
That is easier for the poor man than for the rich man.
That's right. That's right. Because for the rich man, doesn't matter how much money you have, is not enough. You have to have more. The same also is true for the powerful man. Powerful people who have power, doesn't matter how much power they have, they need more. Because the more power you have, the more fearful you are. Yeah. The more money you have, the more fearful you are. You are afraid of losing your money. You're afraid of losing your power.
Never have to do that.
Yeah, you're in good shape. You're in good shape. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, this is very important because what you said, Baha'u'llah in his will and testament that he wrote before he died, one of the first things that he says at the beginning of his will and testament is that we have not left any wealth for our people, and we have not added to their troubles. گنج نگذاشتیم و بر رنج نیفزودیم. In Persian is a very beautiful ganj and ranj. Ganj means wealth, ranj means problems. Okay. He said we didn't leave any wealth for our children and family, and we didn't add to their troubles. Now this is a very interesting thing because money, unless it is used for positive activities, causes problem, causes anxiety, causes worry, causes a sense of wanting more and more and more and never satisfied. It separates you from other people. It creates disunity. It's just amazing how. Anyway, that's a different issue, but it's interesting that they are related to each other. Now, when in the writings of the Baha'i faith, we read about how not only to create physical health, Baha'u'llah says when you are ill, you have to go to a physician. Okay? In other words, Baha'u'llah emphasizes the necessity for scientific aspect of medicine. He says, let me see whether you can. Baha'u'llah's advice is that because all illnesses and conditions, physical conditions, have both psychological and physical dimensions, he says that at the time of illness, we should resort in times of sickness to competent physicians. We have not set aside the use of material means. Rather, we have confirmed it through this pen, which God hath made to be the dawning place of his shining and glorious cause. So Baha'u'llah says, when an individual becomes ill, has to do fundamentally three things. One, go to a competent physician. And obey the competent physician. It's not enough to go to a physician. Okay. It reminds me of a story of this person was not well, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor gave him a prescription, and he took the prescription to the pharmacist and paid for it and bring the medicine home, and then threw the medicine out. His wife said, "What is this? What is this crazy activity you're doing?" He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Why did, you went to the doctor?" He said, "Yes, I was not feeling well. The doctor is sitting there, he's paying rent for his office. He needs money. I am sick. So I went. He has to live. So I went, he saw me, I pay him money, and he gave me prescription." I said, "Okay, why did you go to the pharmacist?" Same thing. The pharmacist has to live. He needs money. He's rented the place. He has everything. He has to live. So I went and got the medicine, paid him money. He said, "Okay, why then you throw the medicine away?" He said, "I have to live also." Okay? We all have to live. Okay? So anyway, but we have to go to the physician, we have to take the medicine, and we have to obey it, and we have to take it. But that alone is not sufficient. We also have to have a prayerful attitude. We should pray. We should reflect. Because Abdul Baha says, ultimately all healing comes from God. In other words, there are certain conditions and situations that wouldn't get better. But if we reflect and we are prayerful and we are thinking, we begin to see the wisdom of what is happening through the suffering and pain that we have. Suffering and pain is not all that bad. No, really. I have gone through it. You have gone through it. It's not all that bad because it makes us much more aware of the dynamics of life, of challenges of life, of why this is coming about, questioning about life, and all of those things. And also makes us also more aware that we are going to die. And death is something that we cannot escape, you see. So I think therefore we need to go to seek the scientific treatment for our conditions. We need to develop our spiritual strength so that our psychological and our morale and so forth would be all positive, so that our immune system would be higher, our confidence would be higher, our ability to accept the consequences of illness and so forth. These are very, very important, okay? And when we combine these things together, then our lives don't become a situation of saying, why me? Why I got sick and why the other people didn't get sick? And is it because I have sinned or because God is angry at me or because of this and that? Because people develop so many views of why the sickness and so forth comes. And when we reflect on it, you see many of illnesses. There are basically two types of illnesses. Those that happen without us having caused them, and many illnesses that we cause them ourselves. Okay. And it's a good idea to reflect and say, what was my role in this process? You see, smoking, drinking, excesses of life, living lives that are not moderate would cause these kind of things. You see, they bring these conditions together. So these are about physical aspects of illness. There are then illness and health and Baha'i approach to it. Then, of course, there are issues of health and healing of the family and marriage, which is a totally different issue, but also is dependent on the issue of unity. A healthy marriage is a united marriage. A healthy family is a united family. As a matter of fact, all counseling and treatment for a family problem or a marriage problem, all of them revolve around the issue of unity. How to create unity in the family, how to create unity in the marriage, unity between parents and children, between children and siblings and so forth. So it's much easier to see the role of unity in the health of the family. And it is much easier to see the role of unity in a society. Like right now, look at the world. The whole world is suffering from disease of disunity. Everything that is happening around the world that is a cause of calamity, at the root of it is disunity. Everything. The wars that are there, the poverty that is there, the violence that is there, everything that is happening. When you go further, deeper and deeper into their causes, you will see is issue of unity, issue of disunity, as a matter of fact. Okay? So, when Baha'u'llah says that the cause of all illness is disunity, and remedy for humanity to be in a state of health is to be in a state of unity, gradually begins to make sense of how it works. Okay, at the physical level, at the psychological level, at the social level, and the global level. And then, of course, the final aspect of health and healing is that we have to realize that doesn't matter how healthy we are, and doesn't matter how much we try to live a condition of health. Nevertheless, death is going to come. And one way or another, we are going to die. So, one fundamental aspect of living a healthy life is to come into grips with our attitude towards death. As a matter of fact, if we avoid thinking about death and be fearful of that, we actually don't live as well. The easier and the more comfortable and the more enlightened we are with respect to the inevitability of the issue of death and trying to understand it and come to a state of peace with it, the greater is our ability to create unity, inner unity, and unity with our destiny, with our, with what is happening and so forth. So societies that avoid looking at the phenomena of death usually become very violent societies because they don't see death as being real, and therefore they cause it. Is like watching television and you see Bugs Bunny, gets killed this week, and then next week Bugs Bunny is up again. Okay, so our children, they see so many times Bugs Bunny dies and he's alive, and dies and he's alive, and it concludes that death is not real. And life is not real. It's just you don't make a distinction. You see, violence and life become mixed together when we don't understand the phenomenon of death.
You say societies. Can you give an example? What do you mean by societies that
avoids death?
Yes.
North American society is an example of it. We have made death very, very... how many times we talked about death? How many programs on, radio and television and so forth, it says, let's understand what death is. We don't do that. How people died. People no longer die at home with their friends and families and everybody around them. People go to the hospital and go to the hospice and they die.
all by themselves?
Yeah, all by themselves, they die. In other words, we avoid death as much as possible. Okay, and even the funeral becomes a ceremony and a ritual rather than an occasion of reflection that this is the journey that we all go through and we are all going. And towards that, you see, one of the things that I did for many, many years in my practice was to work with young people who were facing death. Okay? Children and young people. Either they were dying or somebody close to them was dying. A father or mother, brother, sister, and so forth. And so it pushed me to think about it. As a matter of fact, I just published a book on it. And, I brought a copy for Nushi and Behrus to, so the copy is here. It's their copy. Nobody should take it. but you can, but they can look at it. Here it is. It's called The Mysterious Case of the IWs. Okay? And below said, a story to help children cope with death. Okay? And in it, I used this story to help for 15 years, hundreds of families to deal with the issue of death and understand it and to come to be in peace with it and so forth. So
Do you find people that are really at peace with that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But they needed help. They needed to learn how to do it, how to come to peace with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I had my first heart attack when I was 17.
Yes.
And I've had to sort of look at
death.
Now
Yeah.
85.
You did well, yeah.
And I'm still looking at it in sort of in the same way.
Yes. Well, I don't know how you look at it, but it's it's going to come. So it's a good idea to to somehow become to be at peace with death.
I'm curious, really.
Yeah. Because we cannot avoid it, you see. We cannot avoid it. This man got very frightened and went to presence of King Suleiman, and said, "Oh King, I'm very afraid." He said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well, today I was walking in the streets of Cairo, and I saw the angel of death, and he looked funny at me. So I'm afraid that I'm going to die. I want to get away." And King Suleiman said, "I can do many things, but I cannot deal with the issue of death. That is inevitable, is not in my power." He said, "Well, you have many powers. I'm afraid to go back to my home, to Cairo, because, I saw angel of death there. What can I do?" He said, can you send me somewhere else?" I said, "Well, okay, but I don't know if it would help." So he said, "Okay, jump over the back of the wind, and the wind is going to India, so you go India." So he went over the wind and went to India and landed in Delhi and started walking in Delhi, and suddenly saw the angel of death. And this time, angel of death was surprised. And he said, what are you doing here?" He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well," angel of death said, "Well, this morning I was walking in Cairo, and I saw you there. And God said, 'Go to New Delhi and take this man's life.'" And I, being obedient, I said, "Okay." So I went. I thought that some mistake has been done in the outer world, because you're in Cairo and I have to go to India, but I obeyed. And I came to New Delhi. And now you are here. You see? So you can't avoid it. Okay, dear friend, that's enough for tonight. Thank you.